Welcome to Henry House at the Oshawa Museum. My name is Lisa, and today we're going to be talking about indoor plumbing, or more accurately, the lack thereof inside early Victorian homes. We're inside Henry House, the oldest museum building at the Oshawa Museum. It was home to Thomas Henry, his wife Lorenda, and anywhere between 8 to 9 of their 15 children. And they were one of the first European families to settle along Oshawa's lakeshore. Today, the Oshawa Museum uses Henry House to tell the story of the family and to show how families would have lived back in the 1800s. Quite frequently, when I give tours of Henry House, our guests will say something along the lines of how much they love this home and how much they would have loved to live back in the Victorian times. To that, I usually reply with two very simple words: indoor plumbing. Or, like I said, more accurately, the lack thereof. Back in the Victorian times, when the Henry family would have called Henry House home, there was no indoor plumbing. They had a dry sink in their kitchen, and they likely would have had a water pump outside. So they would have done most of their work in a big bowl, pumped with the water from the outdoor pump, and when they were done with the water, they would be able to throw the dirty water outside. Not having any running water in the kitchen meant that likely it was a lot more challenging for them to do very simple tasks. As you can imagine, they'd have to go outside to pump the water, so something as simple as washing their food, washing dishes, different things like that would have taken so much more time and effort than what we're used to in our 21st century homes. Once we make our way to the bedroom, we talk about the fact that the Henrys actually had an ensuite right here in their very bedroom. We're looking at the washstand with a water pitcher, and on the very bottom shelf is the commode or the chamber pot. Chamber pots were essentially a portable toilet. They were meant for nighttime use inside the bedrooms. You can imagine, middle of the winter, middle of the night. Would you want to use your very comfortable and conveniently located chamber pot? Or would you get all dressed in all your winter gear to go outside to use the outhouse? I know which one I would be choosing. Emptying chamber pots was not a pleasant job. Sometimes it would be transferred into a larger pail in the home, and this pail would be dumped down the outhouse. Quite often, it was the children who were responsible for taking it and emptying it into the outhouse in the morning. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly where the Henrys' outhouse would have been. Locations for outhouses would be determined by climate, soil conditions, water supplies, and its exposure to public view. It was common in many cultures before the advent of indoor plumbing and flush toilets, and it still may be used in places where there isn't indoor plumbing. I think we should consider ourselves very lucky in our location here in southern Ontario. The waterworks at the lake near Ritson Road South in Oshawa was constructed around 1905, and those sewer and water systems started to be installed at this time. This is a photo of the sod turning for the first water line, which took place in 1904. It would be likely that by 1920, most homes would have indoor plumbing. However, there still were some homes that did not. The pumping station in 1920 required upgrades to keep up with our growing population. This is an example of one of the chamber pots we have here in the Oshawa Museum collection. One of the great features of this chamber pot is the fact that it has a crocheted lid cover, which sits on top. And as you can imagine, it helps dampen any noise from taking on and removing the lid, which, if you're sharing a bedroom, which the Henry kids would have been doing, there were a grand total of 11 boys, 4 girls, so chances are they were sharing rooms with their siblings. They were probably grateful that in the wee morning hours, they weren't having to hear the clanging and clattering of any chamber pot's lids. This crochet doily helped keep the noise down. And here are a few other examples in our collection. 2 chamber pots, much like the one that we always have on display in Henry House. This is an early bedpan, which might have been used in hospitals. We've got that lovely little chair with the cover, but when you remove the cover, you will see that there's a hole in that chair. That hole is where the chamber pot would have been placed. And finally, we have the commode. The lid hinges so that when it's down, you can see the lovely embroidering detail. You might not even think twice about whether or not it's a chamber pot. But when you open up the lid, you can see that there is a chamber pot nestled inside. In these times before indoor plumbing, the Henrys likely would have had an outhouse somewhere outside, close enough to the home, but there was no bathroom as we know it today inside the family home.